You saw it in the title, that little shudder in your steering wheel when you sit at a red light, the whole car trembling like it's cold, even though the engine is warm. You feel it in your seat. You feel it in the gear lever. And every mechanic you've asked has shrugged and reached for the expensive parts. But here is what I set out to explain. That shake almost never comes from a broken engine. It comes from one small sensor, no bigger than your thumb, coated in an invisible film that nobody ever thinks to wipe away. And the men who understood this best were German because they built the thing in the first place, and then somehow the knowledge of how to keep it clean got left out of every manual you and I were ever handed. By the end of this, I'll take you to a Bosch workshop in Stuttgart in the year 1981, to the exact moment this part was born, and I'll show you the buried reason it was never meant to be a throwaway. Stay with me, because what I found works on almost any car sitting in your driveway right now. No new parts, no dealership, no special training. I want to tell you where this started for me. It was a cold morning in a little town called Ingolstadt in Bavaria, and I was standing in the open garage of my wife's uncle, a retired man named Klaus. His old estate car was running at idle, and I swear it was smoother than my car had ever been in its life. I asked him why. He didn't answer. He just walked over, pulled one small plug from the air pipe, held up a little sensor, and said one word: Sauber. Clean. I laughed it off at first. I thought. No chance one tiny part explains all that. I had spent real money chasing my own rough idle. New spark plugs, new engine mounts, a diagnostic fee that told me nothing. So I was the last person on earth ready to believe that the answer was a thumb-sized sensor I had never even looked at. But Klaus wasn't guessing. He'd worked around these engines his whole life, and he said something that stuck with me. He said in Germany, the good mechanics don't replace this part. They clean it. And the moment he said that, I felt the thread and I started pulling. So let me show you the first thing I found, because it made no sense to me either. The part Klaus held up is called the mass airflow sensor. Its whole job is to measure the air going into your engine so the computer knows exactly how much fuel to add. Air and fuel have to be balanced. When the measurement is right, the engine breathes easy and idles like it's asleep. When the measurement is wrong, the computer guesses, and a guessing computer is exactly what you feel shaking through your steering wheel. Now here is the part that stopped me cold. Inside that sensor is a tiny wire, thinner than a human hair, heated by electricity. Air rushes past it and cools it down, and the sensor measures how hard it has to work to stay hot. That's how it counts the air. It's a beautiful idea. But a wire that fine only needs the thinnest coating of oil or dust, a film you could never see with your eye, and suddenly it can't feel the air correctly. It reads slow. It tells the computer less air is coming in than really is, and your engine starts running wrong at the exact moment it needs to be gentlest. At idle. I sat with that for a while, because it explained something. It explained why my brand new spark plugs did nothing. The plugs were never the problem. The sensor feeding the whole system bad information was the problem, and no new part downstream could fix a lie coming from upstream. But that only raised a bigger question. If the fix is just cleaning a film off a wire, why had not one mechanic ever mentioned it to me? Why did every single one reach for a new part instead? That's where this stopped being a car story and started being something else. Let me tell you what I dug up next, because this is where I met the first person who quietly benefits from you never knowing. I went looking for what a replacement of this sensor costs, and the numbers made me angry. Depending on your car, a new mass airflow sensor runs from around $100 to over $300 for the part alone. Add the labor and a diagnostic charge, and people are handing over $400, $500 to fix a shake that a 2-minute cleaning would have solved. I read forum post after forum post, men my age, describing the exact tremble you feel, being told they needed a new sensor, sometimes a new throttle body, sometimes worse. One man wrote that he replaced the whole part, felt no difference, and only later discovered the new one shook too, because the real trouble was somewhere he'd never been told to look. And here's the quiet villain in the first act of this. A sensor is a sealed, sold, part number item. A cleaning is not. There is no part number for 2 minutes and a can of spray. The whole repair economy is built to sell you the box on the shelf, not to teach you to wipe a wire. Nobody sat in a room and plotted against you. It's simpler and colder than that. Replacing pays, cleaning does not. So the cleaning knowledge just quietly fell out of the conversation, generation by generation, until a retired man in Bavaria was one of the few left who still did it by hand. But knowing that a cleaning exists is not the same as knowing how it was meant to be done. And that's the trap most people fall into next, because the moment they hear this, they grab the wrong thing and destroy the very part they were trying to save. So I had to go back to the source. I had to find out who built this sensor and how they intended it to be treated, and that trail led me straight to Stuttgart. If you want to go deeper into the German engineering mindset behind habits like this one, the thinking that separates a mechanic who maintains from one who simply replaces, I put everything I've gathered into a book called German Complete, with foundational and advanced material also available as German Basics and German Deep. It covers exactly the kind of practical knowledge that gets buried between you and the people who built these machines. You'll find the details in the description below. But knowing that a cleaning exists is not the same as knowing how it was meant to be done. The company is Bosch, Robert Bosch, the great German engineering house. In the year 1981, Bosch introduced the hot wire air mass meter to the world as part of their fuel injection systems. This was the breakthrough. Before it, engines measured air with a clumsy mechanical flap that wore out and dragged. The hot wire had no moving parts. It was elegant, it was precise, and it was designed by people who understood exactly how delicate that heated element was. The engineers in Stuttgart knew the wire had to run clean to run true. Cleanliness was not an afterthought to them. It was the entire principle the design stood on. And that told me something important. This part was never designed to be thrown away when it got dirty. It was designed around the idea that the air passing through would be filtered and clean, and that the element would keep its precision for the life of the car if nothing was allowed to coat it. The failure we all experience, that idle shake, is not the sensor breaking. It is the sensor being slowly smothered by a film it was never built to tolerate. The Germans who built it knew that. The system that sells us parts had every reason to let us forget it. But that raised the sharpest question yet. Where does that invisible film even come from? If your air filter is doing its job, what is it that keeps landing on this wire and choking it, quietly, mile after mile, until your car trembles at every light? The answer surprised me, because part of it is something helpful your own car is doing on purpose. Modern engines are designed not to breathe out dirty fumes from the crankcase, the oily mist that forms down where the engine's moving parts live. Instead of venting that oily air into the sky, the engine routes it back through the intake to be burned cleanly. It's good for the air we breathe, but it means a faint, constant haze of oil vapor is traveling through the same pipes where your air sensor sits. Over the years, the lightest possible film of that oil settles onto the hot wire. Add a whisper of fine dust that slips past even a good filter and a little fuel residue, and you get a coating so thin you would never believe it could matter. But to a wire thinner than your hair, measuring the breath of an engine, it is everything. There is a second culprit, and it's one people bring on themselves without knowing. Cheap or over-oiled performance air filters, the kind sold as an upgrade, can shed oil directly onto the sensor. I read account after account of men who fitted a fancy oiled filter to help their engine and gave themselves a rough idle within months, never connecting the two. The very thing sold as an improvement was coating the one part that had to stay spotless. So now the picture was complete, and it was almost funny. The engine gently oils its own sensor over time. The dust finishes the job. The computer, fed slightly wrong numbers, starts adding slightly wrong fuel. At speed, with lots of air moving, you barely notice. But at idle, when the engine is sipping the smallest amount of air, That small error becomes the whole world, and the whole car shakes. Klaus's one word finally made complete sense. Sauber. Clean. He wasn't fixing a broken thing. He was removing a film. He was giving the wire back its senses. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking, because I thought it too. You're thinking this sounds like something for a younger man with a lift, a garage full of tools, and a newer car full of computers. You're thinking, that's not me. My car is older, I've got a bad back, and I've never opened anything under that hood in my life. I want to talk to you specifically for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to show you was made for exactly you, the person who assumed this was out of reach. You do not need a lift. You do not need to raise the car at all. This sensor sits up high on the air pipe between your air filter box and your engine, right where your hands can reach it, standing up, leaning in from the side. On most cars, it is held by 2 small screws or a couple of clips and one electrical plug that pulls off with a squeeze. That's it. If you can change a light bulb and work a screwdriver, you can reach this. I have watched men in their 70s do it in a driveway in 10 minutes and stand back up smiling. Here is the part I most want you to hear, because getting this wrong is the one way to ruin it. You must never ever wipe that wire with a cloth, a cotton swab, a brush, or your finger. The wire is so fine that a single touch snaps it, and then you really will need that expensive part. The German method, the correct method, never touches the element at all. You clean it only with a spray, letting the liquid do the work while nothing solid ever makes contact. And you don't use just any spray. This is where people cause damage. Do not use brake cleaner. Do not use carburetor cleaner. Do not use water or glass cleaner or anything harsh, because those can leave a residue or attack the delicate coating on the element. The right tool is a can made specifically for this, sold in every part shop as mass airflow sensor cleaner, and it costs only a few dollars. It flashes off fast and dry and leaves nothing behind. If you cannot find that specific can, high-purity isopropyl alcohol, the 99% kind, does the same gentle job because it evaporates completely and leaves no film of its own. The method itself is almost embarrassingly simple. You take the sensor out. You lay it down somewhere clean. You aim the spray straight at the little wire or film inside and give it 10 or 12 gentle bursts, letting the liquid run off and carry the grime away. You do not scrub. You do not blow it dry with an air line, which can bend the wire. You simply let it air dry completely, fully, for at least 15 or 20 minutes, until there is not a trace of wetness left. Then you slide it back in, plug it back in, and start the car. The first time people do this and feel the idle drop into silence, they tell me the same thing every time. They cannot believe they paid anyone for this. Do this once a year, or whenever that shake creeps back, and you keep the whole system honest for the price of a coffee. That's the frugal German habit hiding inside Klaus's one word: not replace. Maintain. But even after all this, one thing still nagged at me. Cleaning the film explains the shake, it explains the wasted money, but it did not explain why the men in Stuttgart, who knew all of this from the very beginning, let the world forget it so completely. That's the last box, and when I opened it, I understood the whole thing. Here is what cracked it for me. I went looking through Bosch's own technical service material, the guidance they publish for professional workshops, not for you and me, and buried in the way these systems are documented is a quiet truth. The sales counter never repeats. The hot wire and later hot film sensors were engineered with what the Germans call a self-cleaning function. In many of these units, when you switch the engine off, the wire is briefly heated to a high temperature, hot enough to burn off light deposits on its own. The designers in Stuttgart anticipated the very film we've been talking about, and they built in a defense against it from the start. Sit with what that means. The people who invented this part knew, in 1981, that it would collect a film. They knew a clean wire was the whole game. They built self-cleaning into it, and they wrote the cleaning method into their professional guidance. The knowledge was never lost. It was preserved right there in the engineering the entire time. It only vanished from your world and mine, from the ordinary driver's world, because between us and Stuttgart stood a repair counter that made more money handing us a box than teaching us a habit. That is the hero's journey of this whole thing, and you are standing at the end of it. The answer existed. It was designed in from the first day. It was buried not by conspiracy, but by an economy that profits from replacement. It was kept alive by old mechanics like Klaus in small German towns who never stopped doing it the correct way with a can in 2 minutes. And now it's yours. The next time your car trembles at a light, you will not reach for your wallet. You'll reach for that sensor, and you'll remember that the men who built it meant for you to keep it, not replace it. There is one more thing that turns this from a repair into real savings, and I want you to have it. A dirty sensor doesn't only shake your car, it feeds your engine the wrong amount of fuel every single mile you drive, not just at idle. When that wire reads low, the computer can run the engine richer than it needs, quietly burning extra fuel you paid for. People who clean this sensor regularly report the shake vanishing and their fuel lasting noticeably longer because the engine is finally being told the truth about the air it's breathing. So this isn't a once-off fix for an annoyance. It's a small habit that pays you back at every fill-up for as long as you own the car. Think about how much has been quietly taken from ordinary drivers over the years. The $400 and $500 replacements. The diagnostic fees for a problem that needs no diagnosis. The fuel wasted mile after mile because a wire thinner than a hair was wearing an invisible coat nobody told you to wipe off. All of it hidden behind a shrug and a part number when the real answer was designed into the machine from the very beginning by people who assumed you'd be trusted to keep it clean. I think you're the kind of person who feels the same itch I do, the one that can't accept a shrug for an answer, the one that suspects a useful truth has been quietly buried because somebody profits from you not having it. If that's you, then you and I are the same, and this channel is where that itch gets scratched. So let me ask you something specific, and I really do want you to answer. When you first felt that shudder at a red light, what did someone try to sell you to fix it? New spark plugs, new engine mounts, a whole new sensor, or a diagnostic fee that told you nothing? Tell me in the comments, because I read them, and I promise you are not the only one who was sent down the expensive road. And while you're there, tell me where you're watching from, because these old German habits have a way of reaching further than any of us expect. If you know someone whose car trembles at every light, send them this. You might save them $500 this week. If you believe, like I do, that the best knowledge is the kind that was taken from ordinary people and needs to be carried back to them, then come along with me. This isn't about following a channel. It's about a group of us quietly recovering the practical things we were never supposed to forget. Because the next thread I'm pulling is about something German drivers do to their engine oil that lets their cars run past 300,000 miles, and once I show you what it is, you'll never look at an oil change the same way again. Here's the Titan version. You just watched the overview, but the exact cleaning method, step by step, I take you all the way through it inside my membership, the Old Ways Circle. It picks up right where this left off. In there you can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You'd belong with folks just like you. Just point your phone's camera at the code. Cancel anytime, one click.